Have you ever heard a sound that wasn't there? A whisper on a windless night, a footstep in an empty hall. We call them tricks of the mind, phantoms. But the sea has a memory that can hold a sound for a lifetime. It can hold a scream long after the lungs have filled with water. Tonight I tell you of the ship that cried for help for 70 years after it sank, and of the terrible silent truth I found when I finally answered its call. My curse is a simple one. The compass points to a tale of dread, and I, its wretched servant, must give it voice. After the story of the lighthouse keeper, a quiet fell upon my cabin, a quiet I was fool enough to mistake for peace. But the compass was not idle, it was listening. It began 3 nights ago. A faint crackle in the air, a whisper of static that seemed to come from the brass casing of the compass itself, and within it a signal, a voice, thin and frantic, repeating a call for help, a call in a staccato rhythm, a language of taps and holds I have come to understand over my long years. An S.O.S, a common enough tragedy on the water. But the signal was of a kind no mariner has used since the Great Wars, and the ship's call sign, it was for the USS Warden, a destroyer reported lost with all hands in the winter of 1945. The compass needle didn't point to a chart coordinate. It pointed to the sound. It pointed to the ghost. And it pointed me towards a patch of ocean sailors only speak of in hushed tones and with a quick sign to ward off evil, a place on the charts marked only by what it lacks: currents, wind, life. They call it the Stillwater Sargasso, a dead spot in the heart of the living sea, and my compass demanded I sail into it. You do not simply sail to the Stillwater Sargasso, you follow the path of the dead. For 3 days I sailed my vessel, this cursed collection of timbers I call the Sea Sorrow, into the gray north. The sea began to change on the 2nd day. The playful chop of the waves subsided. The cheerful blue bled into a dull, leaden gray. The wind, my only companion on these lonely voyages, grew shy. It faltered, then died completely. My sails hung limp and useless, slack against the masts like hanged men. Yet the Sea Sorrow did not stop. She moved on, gliding through the dead water with no ripple, no wake. Pulled by a current that did not exist, I could feel the unnatural propulsion through the deck plates. A low, mournful groan from the timbers deep in her belly, a complaint against a will that was not the wind's. The water itself grew still, unnaturally so. It became a perfect, unbroken mirror of the colorless sky above. It did not swell or breathe. It was like sailing over a sheet of polished obsidian. The air grew cold and carried with it a strange scent. Not of salt and living things, but of rust, of rot, and of stagnant, forgotten water. The loneliness out here was a physical presence. It was a pressure on the skin, a weight in the lungs. On the dawn of the 4th day, I saw the fog bank. It wasn't a natural mist, born of temperature and tide. It was a wall. A solid, featureless white barrier that rose from the dead water to an impossible height. This was the border, the edge of the world. With her unnatural glide, the Sea Sorrow pushed her nose into the fog, and the world I knew vanished behind me. Inside, the silence was absolute. The only sound was the low groan of my own ship's timbers and the frantic beating of my own heart. The S.O.S signal was stronger now, a clear, desperate pulse in the suffocating quiet. And then I saw the first of them. It emerged from the fog like a bad memory. A ship, an old whaling vessel, its masts tall and proud, its sails hanging in ghostly tatters. It wasn't a wreck. There were no splintered timbers, no signs of a great catastrophe. It was simply there, Adrift, a thick coat of orange rust covered every inch of its metal fittings, and a strange pale weed clung to its hull. No crew was visible on its decks. It just sat, waiting for a wind that would never come. I sailed deeper. The fog swirled and parted, revealing more. A Spanish galleon, its ornate carvings eroded by time, its wood blackened. 100 yards from it, a steamer from the First Great War, its single smokestack dark and cold. A modern fishing trawler, its nets hanging over the side as if the crew had just taken their lunch break, its deck empty save for a few circling silent gulls. I had sailed into a museum, a graveyard, a fleet of ghost ships, each one perfectly preserved in its own moment of decay, trapped in this timeless, windless prison. The dread here was not of a monster, but of a profound and terrible stillness. The S.O.S. was my only guide, and I followed its ghostly thread, navigating through the silent maze of the lost. I drew near a passenger liner from the Roaring Twenties, the SS Serenity. Its name was a cruel joke. Its paint was peeling, its lifeboats were gone, but through its grand portholes, I saw lights, faint, golden, flickering lights, and I heard something else carried on the dead air, music, the faint, ghostly strains of a waltz. I let my ship drift closer. Through a large ballroom window I saw them, figures, translucent, shimmering shapes in fine evening wear, dancing, a man in a tuxedo spinning a woman in a beaded dress. An orchestra on a dais, their movements fluid but silent, their instruments producing only the memory of a sound. They were echoes, echoes trapped in glass, unaware that their ship had stopped moving, unaware that the year was no longer 1928, unaware that they were dead. They were caught in the last happy moment before the iceberg, or the fire, or whatever doom had claimed them. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the air. These souls were not haunting this place. They were part of it. The Sargasso didn't just collect ships. It collected moments. I pushed on, away from that floating ballroom of the damned. The signal grew louder, its desperate plea now an insistent shout in my mind. And then I saw her, the USS Warden. She was a gray wolf of a ship, a destroyer built for war, sleek and menacing, even with the coat of rust and the pale weeds. The ship was intact, its guns aimed at a phantom enemy, and from a strange metal mast strung with wires, I could feel it, the source of the 70-year-old cry for help. The compass on my table spun wildly now, its needle no longer pointing the way, but trembling in agitation. It had brought me here. Its duty was done. Now, mine began. I knew with a certainty that settled like a stone in my gut that I had to board her. I had to find the source of that sound. I had to silence it. I brought the sea sorrow alongside the cold steel hull of the warship. The silence from its decks was more terrifying than the phantom music of the liner. I threw a grappling line, the hook clanging against the rail with a sound that felt like sacrilege. As I climbed the rope, a new smell hit me. The scent of ozone, of burnt wires. A scent of sudden electric death. As my boots touched the deck of the Warden, the world shifted. The fog around me seemed to thicken, and in it I heard a new sound. A scream I recognized. It was the cry of my own first mate from my own lost ship, the Stargazer. I stumbled. The deck of the Warden suddenly felt like the deck of my own ship in its final moments. The cold air felt like the spray of the storm in the hollow reefs. The curse of the Stillwater Sargasso was not just to witness the tragedies of others. It was a mirror. It found the moment of your own greatest dread, and it made you live it again. The compass hadn't just brought me to a story, it had brought me to a trap. I pushed my own ghosts aside and moved forward, every step an act of will. The whispers of my drowned crew followed me, begging me to turn back. I walked the empty corridors of the Warden, guided by the crackle of the distress call. The ship was not empty. I could hear them, the echoes of the crew, hasty footsteps on steel ladders, muffled orders being shouted deep within the ship, the clang of a watertight door. I was walking through the ship's memory, through its last frantic moments of life. I reached a doorway marked Radio Room. Inside, a young man, a boy really, sat hunched over a strange piece of equipment. He was translucent, a figure made of smoke and memory, his fingers flying across a small key, tapping out the same 3 letters over and over again, S.O.S. His face was pale with a terror that was 70 years old, yet as fresh as the spray on my coat. I moved past him, towards the bridge. There, I saw the captain, a tall, grim-faced man, his uniform perfect, his form a shimmering echo against the window. He was staring out into the fog, not at the fleet of ghost ships, but at something I couldn't see. "Hard to port!" His ghostly voice boomed, full of an authority that no longer mattered. "All power astern! Brace for impact!" And then I felt it, a low, grinding vibration that shook the very bones of the ship. Not an echo. This was real. The Sargasso was replaying the ship's final moment, and I was in it. I looked out the bridge window past the ghost of the captain, and I finally understood. The Warden hadn't been sunk by a torpedo or a storm. It had struck something from below. Out in the water, a shape was rising. Something vast and pale and ancient. Not a reef, not a whale. It was a creature whose size defied all law, a living island of flesh and eyes that had slumbered beneath the Sargasso, and the Warden had woken it. The ships were not a collection. They were trophies. This was a hunting ground. As this truth washed over me, my own horror came for me. The whispers of my crew became screams, the radio room faded, and I was standing on the deck of the Stargazer once more. The green lightning of the hollow reefs flashing in my eyes, the cursed waves clawing at my ship, the compass in my pocket burned with a cold fire, its needle now pointing not at the Warden's dread, but at my own. It was feeding on my dread, amplifying it, trying to anchor me here, to make me another echo in this cursed fleet. I had a choice: succumb to my own past and be trapped forever, or silence the ghosts that had called me here. With a roar of defiance, I turned my back on the memory of my own failure. I pushed through the phantom captain, ran back into the radio room, and with all my strength, I brought my fist down on the 70-year-old telegraph machine. The ancient plastic and brass shattered. The S.O.S. signal died in a final, pathetic crackle. For a moment, there was silence. Then a shriek, a collective soul-tearing shriek from every echo on the ship. The boy at the radio, the captain on the bridge, the men below, they all turned their fading eyes to me, their faces twisted in a final, agonizing moment of understanding. And then, like smoke in the wind, they were gone. The vibration stopped. The ship gave a final deep groan, a sound of metal surrendering to time. I ran from the bridge back onto the deck, scrambled down the rope, and cast off the sea sorrow as fast as my trembling hands would allow. As I pulled away, the fog around the USS Warden seemed to thin. Its story had been heard, its loop had been broken. With a sound like a sigh from a giant metal lung, the destroyer began to sink, for real this time. Its bow dipped into the black, still water, its 70-year vigil finally over. It went down into the deep to join its crew, its duty done. I sailed out of that terrible museum, leaving the silent fleet to their timeless vigil. I now understand the nature of the Stillwater Sargasso. It is a wound in the ocean, a place where time and tragedy have festered. And I understand my curse more deeply now, too. The compass didn't just lead me here to be a storyteller. It led me here to be a liberator, or perhaps just to test the strength of my own chains. I am a walking Sargasso, a man who carries a fleet of drowned stories within him. This compass does not just point to dread, it forces me to face it. He became one of the voiceless, another story the sea keeps, another debt I am forced to pay. You've listened, True. Tie your name to the mast. Now, cast the anchor into the tide below. One symbol, one oath. Let it drift where the tide dares.